The first time my mother called me selfish, I was sitting at our scratched kitchen table with college acceptance letters spread before me. My hands trembled as I clutched the scholarship offer from the university 3 states away. It was my ticket out, but the disappointment in her eyes made me feel like I was committing a crime. "So you're just going to abandon us?" Mom's voice cracked. "After everything we've done for you? Who's going to help with your brothers? With the bills?" I was 17, the oldest of 4 children in a single-parent household. My father had walked out 5 years earlier, leaving nothing but empty promises and mounting debts. Since then, I'd become a second mother to my brothers, working part-time at the local grocery store while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Every dollar I earned went straight into the family fund. Every hour not spent studying was devoted to cooking, cleaning, or helping with homework. It's not abandonment, Mom. It's college. I've worked so hard for this. My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. The scholarship covers almost everything. I can send money home when I get a campus job. What about everything that isn't covered? She countered, arms crossed over her chest. And who's going to watch the boys when I pick up extra shifts? Have you thought about any of that, Sarah? I had thought about all of it. I had spent countless nights calculating expenses, researching loans, planning how to balance studies with work. What I couldn't admit to my mother was that I'd also spent those nights imagining freedom, the chance to pursue my own dreams without feeling guilty for having them. "You've always been this way," she continued, shaking her head. "So focused on what you want. So selfish." The word landed like a slap. Selfish. Was it selfish to want an education? To dream of a career that could eventually pull us all out of perpetual financial crisis? To want just once to put myself first? That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I accepted the scholarship. I packed my second-hand suitcase. And 3 months later, I left home amid tears, recriminations, and the crushing weight of family expectations. The calls started during my first semester. "Your brother needs new cleats for soccer," Mom said, her voice tight with unspoken accusation. "The electric bill is past due," she reported a week later. "I had to cut back on hours because your youngest brother is struggling in school," came the update in October. Each call ended the same way. "If you could just send what you can spare." I could never spare enough. My campus job at the library paid minimum wage, and between books, supplies, and the portions of tuition my scholarship didn't cover, I was barely staying afloat. Still, I sent home whatever I could, eating ramen for days afterward and picking up tutoring gigs for extra cash. When I landed an internship at a marketing firm my junior year, the resentment from home intensified. "I saw your Instagram," my mother said during one of our increasingly rare calls. "Looks like you're enjoying the city life while we can barely make rent." The photo she referred to showed me and my roommates at a free outdoor concert, smiling in the sunshine. What it didn't show was how I'd walked 3 miles to get there because I couldn't afford the bus fare after sending money home for my brother's doctor appointment. "It's just an internship, Mom," I explained, trying to keep the defensiveness from my voice. "It doesn't pay much, but it could lead to a real job after graduation." "A real job," she echoed coldly, "because helping your family isn't real work." By my senior year, the pattern was firmly established. Every achievement of mine was met with reminders of what my family was going through without me. Every milestone became an opportunity to question my priorities. My decision to stay at school through summers to take extra classes and work became evidence of my abandonment. My determination to graduate with honors was dismissed as status-seeking. The day I accepted my diploma, only my youngest brother attended. My mother claimed she couldn't get time off work, but Facebook later revealed she'd gone to a cousin's barbecue that weekend. The absence hurt more than I wanted to admit. "Congratulations," my brother Tommy whispered, hugging me after the ceremony. At 14, he was already taller than me, his face losing its childhood softness. "I'm really proud of you, even if they won't say it." His words were a balm on 4 years of accumulated wounds. At least someone in my family recognized what I was trying to do. The marketing firm offered me a position immediately after graduation. It wasn't glamorous, an entry-level role with long hours and modest pay, but it was a foot in the door of an industry I loved. I rented a tiny studio apartment with a leaking faucet and temperamental heating, but it was mine. For the first time, I could breathe without feeling the weight of immediate family obligations crushing my chest. That freedom lasted exactly 3 weeks. "Your brother's graduation is coming up," Mom informed me over the phone. "He needs a suit, and there's the party afterward. We were thinking since you have that fancy job now." I sent the money, a significant portion of my first real paycheck. It seemed important to show that my career didn't mean I'd abandon them, that I could still contribute from afar. But the requests didn't stop there. When the car broke down, I helped with repairs. When Tommy needed a laptop for school, I ordered one. When the roof leaked, I contributed to fixing it. Each time, the assistance was accepted with minimal gratitude and maximum expectation. "It's the least you could do," became a familiar refrain, as if my departure had been an act of betrayal rather than a desperate reach for self-sufficiency. 2 years into my career, I received my first promotion, associate account manager. The salary bump wasn't huge, but it allowed me to start paying down my student loans more aggressively and even begin a modest savings account. I celebrated by taking myself out to dinner, nothing extravagant, just a meal where I didn't have to check the price of every item before ordering. I posted a photo of my celebration dinner on social media without thinking. Within an hour, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "I see you're eating at nice restaurants these days. Meanwhile, we're struggling to put food on the table. Your brother needs braces, and the dentist wants $2,000 up front." The familiar guilt flooded back, but alongside it came something new, resentment. I'd been sending money home regularly for years. I'd postponed my own dreams, worked myself to exhaustion, lived in an apartment so small I could touch opposite walls in the kitchen, and still it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I didn't immediately promise to help. Instead, I asked questions. "Doesn't your insurance cover part of the braces? Have you looked into care credit or payment plans? What about the free clinic at the university dental school?" The response was immediate and furious. How dare I question her parenting? How dare I suggest she hadn't explored every option? How dare I withhold help when I was clearly thriving? "You've changed," she wrote. "Success has made you just like your father, all about yourself." The comparison to my absent father stung more than any other accusation, but it also crystallized something I'd been feeling for years. The goalposts would always move. No amount of support would ever be recognized as enough. My success would always be weaponized against me. The next day at work, I found myself distracted, my mind replaying years of similar conversations. My boss, Elaine, noticed my unusual quietness during our team meeting. "Everything okay, Sarah?" she asked afterward, her shrewd eyes taking in my exhausted appearance. I hesitated. Office politics dictated keeping personal problems personal, but Elaine had been something of a mentor since my internship days. To my horror, I felt tears welling up. "Family stuff," I managed, blinking rapidly. Elaine nodded and guided me to her office, closing the door behind us. "I've been there. Want to talk about it?" Maybe it was her matter-of-fact kindness or just the accumulated pressure of years. But suddenly the whole story came pouring out. My childhood responsibilities, the guilt-laden departure for college, the endless financial demands, and the constant accusations of selfishness. When I finally fell silent, Elaine studied me for a long moment. "You know what strikes me about all this," she said finally. "You keep giving from an empty cup." "What do you mean?" "Your family treats your resources, financial, emotional, all of it, as community property. But they treat their approval and support as something you need to earn over and over. That's not how healthy relationships work. Her words hit with the force of revelation. I'd spent so long accepting my family's framing of the situation, that my departure and pursuit of education had been selfish, that my success came at their expense, that I owed them perpetual restitution, that I'd never questioned the underlying premise. I don't know how to fix it, I admitted. Elaine leaned forward. Maybe you can't. Maybe it's not yours to fix. But I can tell you this. You deserve to build your own life without constant guilt. And real love doesn't come with an invoice attached. That conversation marked the beginning of a slow but profound shift in how I viewed my family relationships. It didn't happen overnight, but gradually I began establishing boundaries. I set up a specific budget for family assistance, an amount I could afford without compromising my own financial health. When requests exceeded that budget, I learned to say no without lengthy justifications. I stopped responding to guilt-trip texts immediately, giving myself time to process my emotions before engaging. The reactions were predictably negative at first. My mother's accusations escalated from merely calling me selfish to suggesting I'd forgotten where I came from and turned my back on family. My brothers, now older, had mixed responses. Tommy, always my supporter, seemed to understand and occasionally ran interference with Mom. The middle boys, heavily influenced by years of hearing how I'd abandoned the family, were more critical. Only my youngest brother, Dave, who had been just a toddler when I left for college, maintained a relatively uncomplicated relationship with me. At 12, he still viewed visits from his big sister as exciting events rather than opportunities for financial assistance. I made sure to spend real time with him whenever I returned home, building a relationship based on connection rather than obligation. 6 months after my conversation with Elaine, I received another promotion, senior account manager with a substantial salary increase. This time, I kept the news to myself, sharing it only with a few close friends who had become my chosen family in the city. I used some of the additional income to move to a slightly larger apartment, one where I didn't have to sit on my bed to use my desk. The rest went toward accelerated loan payments and my slowly growing emergency fund. For the first time since leaving home, I began to feel a sense of possibility rather than perpetual scarcity. I enrolled in a digital marketing certification program, further enhancing my professional credentials. I started dating without the constant anxiety that any relationship would become another drain on my limited resources. I even took a short weekend trip to the coast, my first vacation that wasn't a visit home. Then came the call that would test everything. The house needs a new furnace, my mother announced without preamble. The old one died completely, and the estimate is $7,500. We need your help, Sarah. We can't make it through winter without heat. The amount she was asking for would wipe out my entire emergency fund, money I'd scraped together over years of careful budgeting. In the past, I would have immediately agreed, then spent months rebuilding my finances while eating budget meals and picking up extra freelance work. But now, with my new perspective, I paused. That's a lot of money, Mom. Let me think about what I can reasonably contribute. Think about it. Her voice rose incredulously. Your brothers could freeze. What is there to think about? You have a good job now. I do, I acknowledged calmly. And I have responsibilities that come with that job and my independent life. I'll call you back tomorrow after I've looked at my finances. I hung up despite her continued protests, then sat at my kitchen table, heart pounding. Part of me still felt like that 17-year-old girl, desperate for approval and afraid of being labeled selfish. But another part, the woman who had built a career from nothing, who had supported herself and contributed thousands to her family over the years, knew I deserved more than to be treated like an ATM. That evening, I called Tommy, now a college freshman himself. Is the furnace situation as dire as Mom's making it sound? I asked. He sighed. It's not great. The furnace definitely died, but there's some context you should know. According to Tommy, Mom had been told 6 months earlier that the furnace was on its last legs. The repairman had provided a payment plan option for replacement, requiring small monthly contributions that would have had a new system installed before winter. She'd ignored the warnings, choosing instead to spend money on a lavish Sweet 16 party for my cousin and a new TV for the living room. She kept saying we'd figure it out when the time came, Tommy explained. I think she was counting on you all along. The realization was both infuriating and profoundly sad. My mother had made a financial decision based on the assumption that I would bail her out, that I existed as a safety net rather than as a person with my own life and priorities. That night, I made another decision that would alter the course of our relationship forever. I would help, but on my terms, not hers. The next day, I called the heating company directly. I arranged to pay for half the furnace, with the company providing a payment plan for my mother to handle the remainder. I specified that my contribution was to be a one-time assistance, not an open-ended commitment to future repairs or utility bills. And I made it clear to both the company and my mother that all communication about payments would go directly to her, not through me. When I called my mother with the arrangement, her response was telling. Half? You expect me to pay half? How am I supposed to do that on my salary? The same way other adults do, Mom, I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. Through budgeting and payment plans. You raised me to be responsible, and that's what I'm doing, being responsible with my resources while still helping my family. I never thought you'd turn your back on us like this, she said, her voice cold. I'm not turning my back on anyone, I countered. I'm contributing $3,750 toward a new furnace. That's a significant amount of money and a significant demonstration of care. What I'm not doing is emptying my savings account to solve a problem that could have been addressed differently with proper planning. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. I guess this is who you are now, she finally said. Yes, I agreed. This is who I am. Someone who cares about her family, but also respects herself enough to set boundaries. Someone who will help, but not at the expense of her own well-being. Someone who expects to be treated as a daughter, not a financial resource. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, emotions swirling. There was guilt. Yes, the deeply ingrained sense that I should sacrifice everything for family. But there was also something unfamiliar, pride. Not pride in my career achievements or financial stability, but pride in finally standing up for myself, in refusing to accept a narrative that cast my independence as a character flaw rather than a hard-won victory. That night, I received a text from Tommy. Mom's mad, but she signed the payment plan. The new furnace will be installed next week. I think you did the right thing. His support meant more than he could know. Maybe, just maybe, I was breaking a cycle that would allow him to pursue his own dreams without the crushing guilt I'd carried for years. Maybe my boundaries weren't selfish after all, but the groundwork for a healthier family dynamic. One where success was celebrated rather than exploited, where love didn't come with conditions, and where growing up didn't mean giving up. As winter settled over my small apartment, I felt, for perhaps the first time, the warmth of genuine self-respect. The journey wasn't over, and the conversations with my family wouldn't get easier overnight. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the girl desperately seeking approval at any cost. I was a woman who had built a life on her own terms, a life I was no longer willing to apologize for. Spring came, bringing with it unexpected developments. The furnace situation had created a rift between my mother and me. Our calls were brief and strained, mostly focused on practical matters rather than any meaningful connection. But while that relationship cooled, others began to thaw. Tommy called regularly from college, not for money, but for advice. How had I balanced work and classes? Did I think he should switch his major from business to education? Was it worth taking an unpaid internship for the experience? Our conversations felt like a revelation, family interaction that nourished rather than depleted me. Dave, too, reached out in his own way. He discovered a love for video production and sent me clips of short films he was making with friends. I found myself sending him links to tutorials and occasionally ordering small pieces of equipment that his allowance couldn't cover. Not because I felt obligated, but because I genuinely wanted to support his passion. Even my middle brothers, Mark and Jason, seemed to be reassessing their view of me. After years of hearing their mother's perspective, they developed a certain coldness toward their selfish sister who'd abandoned the family. But as they approached their own decisions about college and careers, they began reaching out with tentative questions about life beyond our hometown. At work, my new boundaries were paying dividends. Without the constant drain of crisis management and financial bailouts, I found myself more focused, more creative, and more engaged. Clients began specifically requesting me for their accounts. My portfolio of successful campaigns grew steadily. 11 months after the furnace incident, Elaine called me into her office. "We're launching a new division focused on digital strategy for startup clients," she said without preamble. "I want you to lead it." I stared at her. "Lead? As in, digital strategy director," she confirmed. "It's a big step up, with a team of 5 reporting to you. The pay bump is substantial. It's also high risk, high reward. If the division succeeds, your career trajectory will accelerate considerably." My heart raced. This was the opportunity I'd been working toward since graduation. Real leadership, creative control, a chance to shape strategy rather than simply execute someone else's vision. It was everything I wanted. "There's a catch," Elaine continued, watching me closely. "The role requires relocation to our West Coast office. We need someone on the ground there to build relationships with the tech startups we're targeting." The West Coast, 3,000 miles from my hometown instead of 300. Further from the complicated web of family obligations, but also further from Dave's blossoming talent and Tommy's college journey. "How long do I have to decide?" I asked. "1 week," Elaine replied. "We need to move quickly on this initiative." I nodded, my mind already racing through implications, possibilities, and potential reactions. "You've earned this opportunity, Sarah," Elaine added as I rose to leave. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That evening, I made a spreadsheet, comparing costs of living, calculating potential savings with the salary increase, researching neighborhoods in the new city. The move made perfect financial sense. The career advancement was undeniable. Still, I hesitated. Moving across the country felt like a second abandonment, a confirmation of every accusation my mother had leveled at me over the years. I could already hear her response. "First 3 states away, now the entire country? Why not just say you want nothing to do with us?" I called Tommy. "That's incredible," he exclaimed when I shared the news. "Digital strategy director at 28? Sarah, you have to take it." "But what about everyone at home?" I asked. "What about you and Dave?" His laugh held a note of exasperation. "Planes fly in both directions, you know. And there's this amazing technology called video calls. It's not like you're moving to Mars." "Mom won't see it that way." "Mom still has a flip phone and refuses to learn how to text properly," Tommy pointed out. "Her resistance to change doesn't mean you should limit your opportunities." He paused, then added more seriously, "Look, you blazed this trail for us, Sarah. Watching you succeed despite everything, despite the guilt trips and the criticism, it showed me what's possible. If you turn down this promotion out of fear of family disapproval, what message does that send to Dave? To me?" His perspective hit me with unexpected force. I'd been so focused on how my choices affected my family in terms of my physical presence and financial support that I'd never fully considered how my example might influence their own aspirations. The next day, I accepted the position. Telling my mother was exactly as difficult as I'd anticipated. "The West Coast?" she repeated incredulously when I called with the news. "What? Chicago wasn't far enough for you. You need an entire continent between us." "It's a major promotion, Mom," I explained, fighting to keep my voice even. Director level. It's an incredible opportunity. An opportunity to forget where you came from, she retorted. An opportunity to leave your responsibilities behind. The familiar guilt rose in my chest, but alongside it came a new emotion. Something like determination or perhaps resolve. My responsibility is to live my life with integrity and purpose, I said quietly. I've never forgotten where I came from. It's shaped everything about who I am and what I've achieved. But remembering my roots doesn't mean I need to stay physically close. And it certainly doesn't mean I should decline career advancement. And what about your brothers? What about Dave? He idolizes you, you know. Dave and I video chat every week about his films, I pointed out. That won't change. In fact, with the salary increase, I can fly him out during school breaks if you'll allow it. He could see California, maybe even tour some film studios. That gave her pause. Despite everything, she did care about her children's opportunities, even if she sometimes struggled to see beyond immediate family needs. And what about financial help? She finally asked, cutting to what I suspected was her primary concern. Nothing changes with my monthly contribution, I assured her, referring to the fixed amount I now sent reliably each month, enough to help but not enough to compromise my financial health. And with the increased salary, I'll set up college funds for the boys. Education trusts that can only be used for tuition and related expenses. It was a solution I'd been considering for months, a way to help that aligned with my values without enabling financial dependence. The money would go directly toward building my brothers' futures, rather than being absorbed into the general household budget. The line went quiet for several seconds. I'll never understand you, Sarah, my mother finally said, her voice softer than usual. You left at the first opportunity, and now you're going even further away. But you keep sending money and talking about college funds. If family matters so little to you, why bother at all? Her question revealed the fundamental misunderstanding that had plagued our relationship for years. In her mind, family loyalty was measured by physical presence and unconditional financial support. The concept that I could deeply value my family while also pursuing my own path seemed incomprehensible to her. Family means everything to me, Mom, I said gently. But so does breaking the cycle of financial instability that defined our lives after Dad left. So does showing my brothers that it's possible to overcome difficult circumstances through education and hard work. So does becoming someone who can truly help rather than just barely staying afloat myself. You make it sound so noble, she murmured, as if leaving wasn't the easier choice. I almost laughed at that, the idea that anything about my journey had been easy. The student loans I was still paying off. The nights spent working while classmates partied. The tiny apartments and discount groceries. The constant guilt and second-guessing. It wasn't easy, Mom. It was necessary. For me, and ultimately, I believe, for all of us. The conversation ended without resolution, as most difficult conversations do. My mother neither blessed my decision nor explicitly condemned it. Instead, she retreated into a familiar passive aggression. Well, you'll do what you want anyway. You always have. That left me feeling both frustrated and sad. 2 weeks later, I flew west to find an apartment. The city was everything I'd imagined, vibrant, diverse, filled with energy and possibility. My new team seemed talented and eager to establish our division as a powerhouse within the agency. For the first time, I would be building something from the ground up with the full support of company leadership. I found a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood within walking distance of both work and the beach. It wasn't luxurious, but it had a small balcony where I could drink my morning coffee while watching the sunrise. After years of basement studios and crowded street parking, it felt like an unimaginable luxury. When I returned east to pack up my old apartment, Tommy drove 3 hours to help me. I've been thinking, he said as we sealed boxes of books. I might apply for summer internships out west next year. Maybe stay with you for a few months. I'd love that, I told him, meaning it completely. And listen, I know Mom's being difficult about this move, But Jason asked me yesterday if I thought you could help him look at colleges in California when the time comes. They're paying attention, Sarah. They see what you're doing. His words stayed with me during the cross-country drive to my new home. Perhaps my influence on my brothers' lives wasn't defined by daily physical presence, but by the example I set through my choices. Perhaps by pursuing my own path despite opposition, I was silently giving them permission to do the same. The first 6 months in California passed in a blur of work, settling in, and establishing my new team. The division exceeded projections in its second quarter, landing 3 major startup clients and establishing a reputation for innovative digital strategies. Elaine flew out for a visit and took me to dinner to celebrate. "I knew you were the right person for this," she said, raising her glass. "Here's to proving me right." I smiled, thinking of how far I'd come from that tearful conversation in her office years earlier. Here's to giving people a chance to prove themselves. "Speaking of which," she said, setting down her glass, "how are things with your family? Any improvement?" I considered the question. My relationship with my mother remained complicated. She still occasionally called with financial emergencies, though less frequently than before. When I maintained my boundaries, offering only my established monthly contribution, she still responded with disappointment and subtle accusations. But something had shifted slightly. "My brothers are doing well," I told Elaine. "Tommy's thriving in college. Dave's coming to visit next month, his first time on a plane. The middle boys actually call sometimes just to check in, not to ask for anything." "And your mother?" I sighed. "She's the same mostly, but there was this moment last week. She called to tell me about a promotion she got at work, assistant manager at the department store where she's been working for years. It was the first time in memory she's called just to share good news, not to ask for help." Elaine nodded thoughtfully. "Small steps." "Very small," I agreed, "but movement in the right direction." What I didn't tell Elaine was about the conversation that had followed my mother's promotion announcement. "The extra dollars per hour will help with the bills," Mom had said, pride evident in her voice despite her practical framing. "That's great, Mom. You deserve it after all your hard work." A pause, then, "Your brother Mark is talking about community college in the fall." "Really? That's wonderful. Has he decided on a program?" "Computer science, if you can believe it. Says he wants to build websites or something. I told him he should talk to you about it, since you work with all that digital stuff now." The suggestion that Mark should consult me, that I might have valuable guidance to offer, represented a subtle but significant shift. For the first time, my mother was acknowledging my professional expertise as something beneficial to the family beyond just my earning potential. "I'd love to talk with him about it," I'd replied, carefully keeping the surprise from my voice. There are some great career paths in tech, and many don't require a 4-year degree to get started. Another pause, longer this time. "You know, when you first left for college, I was sure you'd fail. Not because you weren't smart, you were always too smart for your own good, but because I thought you needed us as much as we needed you." The admission stunned me into silence. "I was wrong about that," she continued, her voice uncharacteristically reflective. "You didn't fail. You've done well for yourself." It wasn't an apology for years of guilt trips and accusations. It wasn't a complete validation of my choices or a promise to respect my boundaries in the future. But it was something I'd never expected to hear. An acknowledgement, however small, that my path might have had merit on its own terms. "Thank you for saying that, Mom," I'd managed, throat tight with unexpected emotion. "It means a lot to me." Now, sitting across from Elaine in an upscale restaurant 3,000 miles from my hometown, I thought about the complex web of relationships that had shaped me. The mother who had both held me back and given me the stubborn determination to succeed. The brothers who were finding their own ways forward, perhaps partly inspired by my example. The mentor who had helped me see that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary. "Earth to Sarah," Elaine said, waving her hand in front of my face. "Where did you go just now?" I smiled, just thinking about journeys, and how rarely they follow a straight line. "Speaking of journeys," she replied, "headquarters is already talking about expanding your division internationally within the next 2 years. You could be looking at global travel, bigger team, bigger budget." The possibility sent a thrill through me. From a small-town grocery clerk to potential global division leader in less than a decade. It was more than I'd ever imagined possible. "I'd like that," I said simply. Later that night, I stood on my small balcony, watching the moonlight on the distant ocean. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Countdown to California, 23 days!" followed by a string of film camera emojis. I smiled and texted back, "Can't wait to show you everything." A moment later, another text arrived, this one from Tommy. "Just aced my marketing final. Your study tips worked." Something warm expanded in my chest, a feeling of connection that transcended physical distance and financial exchange. This, I realized, was what I'd been working toward all along. Not just professional success or financial stability, but the freedom to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. My phone buzzed once more. My mother. "Mark's been accepted to the community college program. He wanted me to tell you." I waited, expecting the usual follow-up request for textbook money or a new laptop. When none came, I simply replied, "That's fantastic. Please tell him I'm really proud." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, he knows. We all do. I stood there for a long moment, the phone warm in my hand, the night air cool on my face. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation or a complete transformation of our family dynamic. Tomorrow, there might be another crisis, another request, another implied criticism of my choices. But tonight, in this moment, there was acknowledgement, recognition that my journey hadn't been about abandonment, but about creating possibilities for myself and, in different ways, for all of them. I took a deep breath of salt-tinged air and looked up at the vast, star-filled sky. For so long, I'd carried the weight of being called selfish, as if wanting more from life was somehow a character flaw rather than a natural human aspiration. I'd internalized the idea that physical distance equated to emotional abandonment, that personal success came at the expense of family loyalty. Standing there, 3,000 miles from where I began, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't built a career without my family. I'd built it despite their resistance, yes, but also because of them, because of the resilience I developed navigating our complicated dynamics, because of my desire to create stability after years of financial precariousness, because of my hope that success might eventually benefit us all. And now, slowly, imperceptibly, something was shifting. Not everything, not completely, but enough to matter. Enough to suggest that boundaries weren't walls, but foundations upon which healthier relationships could eventually be built. My youngest brother was counting down the days until his visit. My mother had acknowledged my success without immediately asking for money. Mark was following a path toward higher education, perhaps partly inspired by seeing my journey. I wasn't naive enough to believe that all our family patterns had been magically resolved. There would still be difficult conversations, unreasonable expectations, and the occasional accusation of selfishness when I maintained my boundaries. But now I understood that these reactions reflected my family's limitations, not my worth. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the narrative I'd grown up with. Pursuing individual dreams and supporting family were not mutually exclusive propositions. Success didn't require abandonment. Distance didn't preclude connection. And most importantly, wanting more from life, education, career, purpose beyond immediate family needs, had never been selfish at all. It had been necessary, essential, the oxygen mask I needed to secure on myself before I could truly help anyone else. As the cool night air filled my lungs, I felt something long knotted inside me finally begin to unwind. Not guilt, not defensiveness, not the desperate need for validation that had driven so many of my actions over the years. Something else entirely. Freedom. Not just financial independence or geographic distance, but the profound inner liberation that comes from rejecting false choices and embracing a more expansive truth, that love could exist without sacrifice, that family could survive separation, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for the people who raised us is to become more than they ever imagined we could be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new client meetings, new family dynamics to navigate. But tonight, standing under the California stars so far from where I began, I finally felt the weight of that word, selfish, fall away from my shoulders. I hadn't abandoned my family by pursuing my dreams. I had shown them that dreams were worth pursuing,